My name is Sakhon Nhek, and I currently live in Sacramento, originally from Chicago, but I was born in Thailand, like most refugee survivors of um, the Cambodian War. And I am a photographer. I do many forms of art, but that has been my latest focus. And the genre that I've connected with most has been still life. So, although I've dabbled in commercial and all forms of photography, that has been what drives me to practice photography.
Why did you become an artist?
It started out as a spiritual connection through observing and becoming curious. I would like to look at something and sit with it and feel a natural connection to the universe through observation. It became kind of my spiritual practice over time. And I started capturing it on film, and the relationship kind of evolved on its own. And so when I practice still life, it takes me to that place where I can observe an object or a moment, whether it's lighting or texture, usually inspired by nature. And then it stills me from my everyday crazy life. And so I use that space to kind of find balance and reconnect. And it's always kind of been a form of therapy.
Well, let's talk about some of the pictures. All right, the first one I'm looking at is called Kiwi Spine. What can you tell us about that?
Kiwi Spine it's a self-portrait, and at the time I was struggling with my own darkness in many ways, and so I was also doing a project with branches at the same time because I have a real fondness for trees and branches. And so I wanted to kind of explore my sexuality and my darkness, and at the same time exploring how nature connects with us. And the project really kind of evolved on its own. I always start with kind of a rough idea of what I want to do, and then it just takes its own life. So when I was photographing this image, naturally I was just kind of wanting to dissolve into the universe and how nature emerges when, there's not so much that we could do. We kind of, the idea that we run around, we let life run our lives, and eventually nature kind of takes over its course, and I'm dissolving into the background. And then looking at it, it looks like a spine that holds me up, and that was very symbolic because oftentimes when I photograph nature, it's because it's spiritual, it really balances me. So that image is conveys exactly how I feel with my relationship with what I do and the world. And so it was a very spiritual and self-discovery moment, and finding peace with my own body, and not the sense that it's a beautiful thing and it doesn't have to be objectified. And so especially in my culture, nudity is so such a taboo. So to put myself out there was very humbling, and finding a place of security in that.
So the concept of darkness that you want to explore, is that related to being born in the refugee camps and growing up as an immigrant in the United States?
Yeah, I grew up in a childhood that was in its own dysfunctional sense. I'm the oldest child, and culturally, it puts a lot of pressure on you. In a sense, I raised my family at a very young age. You get put a lot of expectation. My family coming in such a traumatic way. You hear so many sad stories, and it's really hard to grow up as a child in that culture and not be affected in some dark way.
Well, let's go on to another photo. I'm looking at Genesis now. This is obviously a very evocative work. What do you have to say about this?
This is the beginning of my photographic journey, and so I think it kind of speaks of that. I'm a floral designer also by trade, so I have a natural connection with plants and flowers. And I originally came to California to study horticulture, which didn't end up being my path, but curious about growth. And so this was the very beginning of my photographic education. And right before I joined the program, I was going to study to become a horticulturist. So I was still very connected to that idea, even though I wasn't continuing that path. And so I was looking for a project to work on, and I had gone to the food market and found some seeds and started soaking it in water every week and looking at the growth. I would sprout the same exact type of seed, even though it was a different seed each week. How it would grow would be very different. And so it was really amazing to watch how we have no control over how our situation or what comes of us sometimes. And we get put into this, very controlled environment. It's a cup of water under the sun. And then you just bloom in every way, and each plant or each seed would emerge in a very different sprout. And it was very beautiful and curious. And it made me realize how vulnerable and lack of control we have in some sense in our lives.
What has been the response from the Cambodian American community to your work?
Um, it's a little bit more modern in a sense than what they're used to, or I should say, not as conventional. My mother, thinks I should be a commercial photographer, doing weddings and making lots of money from it, which is, I can appreciate, but not necessarily what I connect to. So I'm trying to convince them that it's my own personal spiritual practice, because she's a very spiritual person. But I think the modern generation really appreciates it. It's something unique. It's something personal, and I think it brings a sense of curiosity, and it challenges their traditional views. So they find it interesting, but not quite sure what to do with it sometimes. I guess I'm very proud, however way it impacts people. It allows them to stop and think about it and be with it and question it. So at least that's the goal.
All right, well, what is behind this work?
Trumpet is in the same series of Noki. I was using a different variety of mushrooms to create a different feeling. Gnocchi is much more brighter. It kind of feel like a sense of it's grown, it's become fruitful, it's living in the light in a way that it's met its destination, so to speak, whereas Trumpet is kind of in the shadow still, trying to find the light, in a sense, coming out of the darkness and hoping to become this potential size trumpet, because the size of the trumpet is rather small. It's a very immature size, and so I thought it was very appropriate to put it under more of a dense, sporadic light setting.
Right, is this symbolic of anything?
Um, just how I feel that, at different phases of our lives, I feel like the growth, the mental growth that we experience from adolescent to adulthood, there's different windows of light in which we find revelation or lessons, and giving us a sense of our growth. And so perhaps Trumpet is my adolescent years, where I'm 13 years old and trying to discover myself. I'm living in a bit of darkness. I feel like I'm trying to break through all the cultural barriers, or I'm a Cambodian person living in an American culture and trying to find my identity and my place. outside of my own darkness. And so it was very symbolic that way. And Noki is a more mature state of brightness where I feel like once I become an adult and I have a sense of freedom in making choices, that I have a better control of my life and finding success that is meaningful to me.
You've managed to pursue your own dreams and kind of establish yourself as an artist. Do you have any advice for Cambodian Americans with the same kind of aspirations?
Um, Gosh, well, my advice is is I was reading one of my professor's lecture articles the other day, and I really connected with it. Is that advice is giving them means that you have a sense of you know what you're doing, and I really don't. But honoring your heart and doing something that is really meaningful, because I find that when you're on a path that is contrived or is influenced by others, it's not sustainable. Eventually, it will just you lose interest, and so I find that when I'm practicing art in a form that I resonate with, I can do it for a long period of time, and it really teaches me something personal that I can't get from someone else's imposition on my art. So it's a personal journey, and the success of that project will unfold in a way that's necessary for your own growth. I can never predict what this project will do for me, but my heart says this is where I need to be right now, working on it. And then by the end of the project, the lesson is revealed, not necessarily in, oh, I have to change my lighting this way. It's so much more grander. So, the intention of why you're working on something, and then what your goal is will eventually kind of become fruitful in a way that it needs to be. So maintaining the authenticity of what you want to do.
Well, if people want to follow your art or find out more information about you, what's the best way?
I have a website. It is Sakhon at sakhondesign.com, and I use it as mainly my portfolio. Facebook, Sakhon Design, has what is the latest and upcoming events and work that I work on. So I try to be consistent about updating new projects. I took a little break from my work, but this is actually a perfect time because I'm transitioning into getting back into the workflow. So hopefully some new things will be coming up soon.
That's all for this podcast. If you'd like to learn more about my experiences in Cambodia, grab a copy of my book At Home on the Mekong on Amazon. For the latest news on the Cambodian American community, go to Khmerican.com. Theme music courtesy of Bochan Hui. For more information, go to bochanmusic.com.